moving melody. The temple was not large, so it provided an intimate setting. And there, Prabhupada gave one particular lecture, which I'll always remember. The lecture only lasted 3 minutes. I was sitting right in front of him, and he began to explain how Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda are so merciful. They're giving Krishna, although no one knows who is Krishna. And he urged, take shelter of Lord Chaitanya. As he was speaking like that, his voice full of wonder and devotion. Just 2 minutes into the lecture, his voice began to crack, and as I sat in front of him, I saw the tears shoot from his eyes like coming from a syringe. And then Prabhupada just stopped speaking and, without another word, climbed off the Vyasasana and left. And devotees who were with him when he went to his quarters said he didn't speak at all about what had happened.
On Monday morning, Tamal Krishna Maharaj took all of us, about 80 devotees, there were 3 bus parties who had converged on Atlanta to see Srila Prabhupada. We all went into Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada started to lean against his bolster, and he spoke about brahmachari life. And he said, my Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, loved this brahmachari life. He said, you can sleep anywhere, but if you get married, then you have to get an apartment, and so much trouble. So when those 3 words came out of his mouth, my jaw dropped. I was like shocked. I thought, he's trying to save us. He's trying to save us. Then his smile went off his lips, he became grave, and his eyes became deep, and he said, so the senses will bite. They will demand satisfaction, he said. Then he pointed his finger at us, but you preach. Then he put his hand up, and you pray to Krishna. And Krishna can make this itching sensation go away. And he flipped his hand, poof. But then his hand went like this. But if it does not go away. And he pointed in the back of the room was standing Gadidas and Ajadas. Then like them you can take. He did not insist that we remain brahmachari. But my Guru Maharaj, very much like this brahmachari life. And that's how he ended his talk. And as soon as he ended it that way, I thought, that's it. No more questions. That's what I'm going to do. I was completely convinced. And the crux of his conversation was, preach! That was the most impressionable thing of my entire devotional life.
When Prabhupada saw Sri Gauranitai, he named this New Panihati Dham. And then also I presented an outline of a book, Life in its Origin, about 12 to 14 chapters in this book. And Srila Prabhupada approved all of them. And then Prabhupada said, but you should have 1 more chapter in this book. So the title was, Original Life is Lord Krishna. And then I requested Prabhupada, will you please write that? Prabhupada said, yes, I'll write for your book. And we are supposed to write that book together, but it has not still come out yet. I'm praying Prabhupada's mercy. What I'm planning to do is get the compilations from Prabhupada's writings, and then try to put it together, that section. Original Life is Lord Krishna.
You know that when one goes to see the spiritual master, one should have an offering, and so we found a wonderful old photograph of his Guru Maharaj, and we put it in a frame, and Kim beautifully decorated it with pearls and gold paint. It was quite attractive. So he had entered the room and was sitting at the end of the room, and on either side were all the senior devotees and sannyasis, and Prabhupada looked to his disciples and he said, where is my Guru Maharaj? There was no photograph of his Guru in the room. I didn't realize that this was Bhaktisiddhanta's appearance day. And at that very moment I walked up to him, approached him, and handed him a picture of his Guru Maharaj. Prabhupada put his hands in a namaste pose and just bowed his head a little to me in gratitude. It was just a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to present something to Srila Prabhupada. He was always so gracious to me. He always treated me with such affection and respect. I was not qualified for anything, yet he always gave me everything.
After Prabhupada arrived, he had darshan, and I was invited to come up. I had my son with me, and I walked in, and Prabhupada said, "Who is this?" I said, "This is my son." And he said, "This is a very nice boy. I want you to take care of him and take care of your family." And I was thinking more about book distribution because that was my service. At the time in the movement, family life was not something that we really thought about. So later on, my son and daughter were put into prison. It was when that happened, I went back to that, and I heard that clear from Prabhupada: take care of your son, take care of your family, and I realized that I'd failed in that effort. So for 5 years, I did some soul searching. I wanted to really understand the true meaning of family. So I just felt inspired to try to establish an organization to deal with the issue of family. The organization that I've established, it's called Save the Family Foundation. The first thing that we try to do is establish the fact that God has to be the center. And if God is in the center, then there is a foundation on which to build the family on. And I've been able to do that, and now my son and daughter are doing very well. They're living productive lives. And going back to Prabhupada's instruction, that the way to really please my spiritual master is to take care of my son and take care of my family. So I've dedicated myself to that mission.
When he offered arti to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, I was looking from a great distance, and all I could see was an ocean of saffron and dundas. And being in a woman's body, I was so frustrated because I knew I wasn't going to get to see Prabhupada offer the puja, and I was Gaurnitai's pujari. So there's a window right beside where Prabhupada was, and I ran around the outside of the building and stood in the window so that I was facing Prabhupada, and I could see every expression, everything he did. And there were other women, they joined me. And then after he would offer the arti paraphernalia to Bhaktisiddhanta, he would turn and he'd offer right to us in the window. And as he was offering the conch shell with the water in it, Prabhupada was looking for the bowl to pour the water in. And he looked over at Balavanta and said, "Bowl, bowl." And Balavanta put his hands up in the air and went, "Hari bowl, Hari bowl." And I was like, oh no, he wants a bowl. And Prabhupada, you could see that he was a little perplexed, what am I going to do with this water? And so he turned and he just poured it all over Tulsi Devi. And Balavanta said that Prabhupada asked him, "Who has dressed the deities?" And he said, "Titiksha." And he said, "Very nice." So when Balavanta told me, it's like at least I can take that with me, that I pleased him at least once.
Once in Calcutta, we were driving back from somewhere, and we went past this one park, and Prabhupada pointed to it, and he said, "See that park? When I was a boy," he said, "I used to play football there." And then he laughed, and he said, "I was the goalie, because they didn't have to run around. And I didn't like to run around so much, so I became the goalie." Calcutta was such an interesting place to be in because it was Prabhupada's home through his childhood. He had such an amazing memory, going way back. I remember the first time going to Mayapur with Prabhupada. It was just one carload of devotees. It was just Prabhupada, myself, the secretary, and or maybe two cars, then a few other devotees, and we prepared prasadam, and Stopped at the mango grove, and it grew into a really big, you can see a really big ritual here with dozens of devotees. But it started out very simply, and it was a very beautiful place, and it was nice. It was like the halfway point on the way to Mayapur. The first time I went to Mayapur with Prabhupada, there was just a thatched roof Goshala where Prabhupada stayed. So things changed quite rapidly. And this, also changed from just a few devotees into, a caravan of vehicles headed to Mayapur. But again, the principle of it was always the same, and Prabhupada taking prasadam was, it's still that same consciousness was there. Prabhupada sat quietly and honored prasadam.
Krishna Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare.
1975 was the first year that everyone practically who was a devotee for some time got to go to India. They had an initial first festival in '74, and it was more or less the senior devotees, leaders, temple presidents. But '75 was open to everyone. All the devotees went together on the same plane, leaving out of New York. We all sat together. The middle section was all devotees, New York devotees, and the other cities nearby. During the flight, we would have kirtan because we loved kirtan. And the devotees would get in the aisles of the plane, and we'd be jumping and chanting, and the plane would start to move back and forth, and the captain had to make an announcement, please take your seats so you're disturbing the plane. Prasadam was provided by the temple. We all brought packaged prasadam. And when we stopped in London, the London devotees all met us at the airport and brought us more prasadam. And this was Radha London Ishwara prasadam, and that was very special. And because most of us had never been to Europe before. And then we arrived in Calcutta. I remember them saying that this was the first 747 to land in Calcutta, Dum Dum Airport, and it was half full of devotees. It was an Air India flight. Because I remember on the inside of the plane, they had the depictions of the Rasa Leela as the decorations on the walls, Krishna and the gopis, and the stewardesses all wore saris. Everything was new, everything was fresh. We were all very happy because we were in the Holy Land, and everything was transcendental. The Ganges was there, the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the center of ISKCON. Prabhupada desire was to have Mayapur as the world headquarters. And to be with all the senior devotees, all the sannyasis, to be with Srila Prabhupada. Most of us had come from smaller temples. A lot of temples were 10, 15 devotees. I was in New York, we had a lot of devotees, but a lot of temples were small. So to be with this many devotees was very special. And just nonstop classes with Prabhupada, going to special holy places, bathing in the Ganges, reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita for the first time. This was like a trip to the spiritual world. It was something very special.
Srila Prabhupada, when he would come, it was such a momentous occasion for everybody. I mean, the devotees would be waiting and waiting, and he'd come in a caravan of cars. I remember that sometimes there'd be lookouts on the top of the building watching to see when Prabhupada was coming. And then when you could see him, his car coming around the corner from a distance, they'd set off a firecracker. And then everybody know that Prabhupada was coming and start blowing conchas and running. And when the news came, sometimes the devotees would run out several hundred meters from the temple to receive Srila Prabhupada, and then walk with him with a huge kirtan, and then accompany Prabhupada all the way to the temple.
It was announced what time he was arriving and that we should all go down to the gate to greet him. And I'd never seen the temple like so beautiful as they had it ready, you know, for Prabhupada's arrival. I mean, every morning, halfway through japa, just before the greeting of the deities, they would clear everybody out and then they would clean it really nice. But the day that Prabhupada was arriving, I remember that Bhavananda had put whole banana trees on either side of the deity room with Radha Madhava and Mahaprabhu. And it just is incredibly aesthetically beautiful. It was so clean. And then, of course, Prabhupada didn't arrive on time. There was some communication problems. So finally they heard somewhere where Prabhupada had stopped and, you know, a new time he would arrive. And when he arrived, you saw all the cars coming up the road. Of course, there was always a problem for the ladies. You know, the men were like always really pushy about being up in front, and I remember always wanting to be like a little closer without, you know, getting in and having a fist fight or something like that. But when Prabhupada arrived and he came in, I remember the car behind, Pishima was in it. And so she came in, and I never knew her or met her, and I wasn't even sure who she was, and then someone told me who she was. And I noticed how after Prabhupada offered obeisance to the deities, everyone crowded down around the Vyasa-san. But Pishima came in and she went up by the deities and settled herself, and she was opening her bag and getting little things there. And so I went over and sat there and thought, well, this is very nice. I'm right here. Here's the deities. I can actually see Prabhupada. And I have no problem because I'm under a speaker, so I can hear him. So it really made the whole rest of the visit in Mayapur peaceful for me, because it wasn't really necessary to, you know, physically get in a fight or something to try to squish right up next to him. Actually, it was a nice position. And I actually then got an appreciation of seeing Prabhupada surrounded by all the devotees. So I always liked that, just appreciating seeing him happily surrounded by the devotees.
The best time of the day is actually when Prabhupada came for the morning program. He'd go out for a morning walk, and Prabhupada would always come back exactly the same time for darshan. And it's quite difficult. Oftentimes he went down to the Ganga, he went over to the Jalangi side, across all the rough grounds and everything, where there's no proper roads. But somehow or another, he would always come back exactly on the same time. The temple would be completely clean. No one would be allowed in the temple before Prabhupada came. No one could step foot on the marble after it had been cleaned. And they would have flowers outside the gate showering when Prabhupada came. And then Srila Prabhupada would come in and he would walk towards Radha Madhava. And he would come and take darshan and look at Radha Madhava. Sometimes he would say different things. One time he said that Radha Madhava, they are dancing. And another time he said, you see how Radharani, she's holding her right hand out with the thumb and forefinger touched. She's offering a tambola pan. Sometimes you see Radharani, she's got her palm held out forward, giving benediction, blessing. He said, when Radharani is holding this, offering this pan to Krishna, he said, Krishna can never leave her.
That was a big conversation at one morning walk. World War III. So the devotees, everyone just got real close, you know, and started probing. And Prabhupada said the war would start between India and Pakistan. Then Prabhupada said after the war, the preaching would be very good. The devotees were saying, well, what should we do? You know, should we start the farm? And Prabhupada was saying yes. And he said, but we don't care. He looked up into the sky and he said, we'll just look up and see the bomb. You know, here comes Krishna. Same thing in Mayapur when the snake was there. He said, we don't care. If Krishna wants to save you, no one can kill you. If Krishna wants to kill you, no one can save you. So he didn't express any concern on our part, but just it was in reference to preaching, how the war would affect preaching and how it would be better after the war. Not that we were afraid of the war or death. But one walk, when we used to walk in those little single files, like along the little paths, you know, between the paddies, he said something to the effect like, Prabhupada, how do we understand that the spiritual master knows everything? And Prabhupada said, no one can know everything. Only Krishna knows everything. He said, but the spiritual master knows whatever Krishna wants him to know. And then he also said the spiritual master knows everything that his spiritual master has given him. So in that sense, he knows everything. But only Krishna knows everything.
I'll tell you this. From the time I met him in Lower East Side until his passing, he didn't make a single mistake. And he once said something like this about his guru. He said, even when he was wrong, he was right. Every step advanced the society. I had to take a running leap across a rice paddy ditch, and Prabhupada once did it in one step, and we looked at each other. How did he do that? How did he do that? One thing, when Prabhupada came to the marble Mayapur temple, he praised Bhavananda, said, "Thank you for keeping everything very clean." Management means just keep everything clean.
In 1975, I was in Mayapur for the festivities, and I had the privilege of filming Srila Prabhupada when he circumambulated Radha Madhava and rang the bell with all the devotees dancing around him, and also on his morning walks. At one point I filmed him from behind, from Prabhupada's point of view, as he approached the temple. And in this service, I only felt support from Srila Prabhupada. I never felt that he in any way disapproved of what I was doing, but rather that he approved of it and actually encouraged it. So I took this as Prabhupada's personal mood towards the women, not just me, but towards women generally in spiritual life. There was only encouragement, enthusiasm, and appreciation of our service. So in that way, I felt personally protected, and also I think all the women in Prabhupada's society felt this protection and encouragement from Prabhupada.
When Prabhupada would ring that bell, everyone would go wild. And it was as if it was a confirmation that we were doing the right thing by performing kirtan in Mayapur. Whenever Prabhupada would do something a little out of the ordinary, move, dance, express the ecstasy that we could feel that he was about, that kind of external confirmation of it would drive the